Tom Martin, and welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series that is named after the brand new book by my dear friend David Parker. And in every episode, we take a look at thought-provoking topics, things that might be in the newspaper headlines, in the news, and so on. But we go a bit deeper, and that's exactly what I love to do. I'm a lifelong journalist, and I love asking tough questions and learning something new, especially in this day and age of polarization. And David suggested a very interesting topic, which I look forward to learning more about. It's called the 1619 Project. It's a new journalism project. Again, I'm a lifelong journalist, but it's a new journalism project that was started by the New York Times. And let me just read a little bit to set the context for it, for this discussion. This is from Wikipedia. I know they say you can't believe everything you read on the internet, but this is what Wikipedia tells us. The 1619 Project is a long-form journalism endeavor developed by Nicole Hannah-Jones, writers from the New York Times and the New York Times Magazine, which, quote, aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of the United States national narrative. And I can, we live in an age where many people are talking about hashtag Black Lives Matter and, related topics. So sounds like a worthy topic of discussion. David, what do you make of the 1619 Project?
What you just said is totally false. Blacks were part of American history, but they're not part of the essence of our history, in the sense that the founding fathers, what they contributed, and the Industrial Revolution, what that contributed, that made us a great nation. All the rights we have as a people that are established by the founding fathers, right? We're a Jeffersonian democracy. Every citizen has the vote, regardless of wealth or social status. Blacks didn't have that, and that's very sad and unfortunate, but it's secondary to American democracy. And they're putting that primary, and they're putting American democracy second. That's just a mistake. You can't do that, because then the schools started teaching that, and the kids come home from school. We eliminated 3 board members of San Francisco school board because kids were coming home to their parents. Did white people do anything right? You can't go that direction. That's past history, and Africa was just as responsible as America for slavery. It's not just one-sided, and it's wrong and must be protested all the time and countered all the time. But it's secondary. That's my point. It's secondary, not primary.
So, you might disagree with me to use this word, but I was going to say it's a complicated subject. I know that, the college that I went to many years ago, Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., a couple of years ago, they paid reparations. It's such an old university, like, a couple in this country. They paid reparations to the families of slaves. And after that kind of, people might say that's woke consciousness or, liberal guilt or something like that. But there was certainly a lot of, undesirable attributes of that era of our history. I see what you're saying about Jefferson and, the founding fathers and so on. And I was just curious, is the 1619 Project saying we seem to not be giving African Americans credit for contributions they've made over 250 years, but we're confusing things because, again, at that particular era, 1776, things were a bit different. I just want to get clarification here, I guess.
The founding fathers, some of them had slaves, but they didn't go out themselves particularly. They just inherited them. Thomas Jefferson's father was a complete business, inexperienced person. The whole Monticello was mortgaged to the hilt, and Jefferson studying night and day biology and law and political science. He just didn't want to deal with it because it meant stopping his whole life, selling everything to pay off the mortgage. And he, as a young man, he just dropped the ball, just didn't want to deal with it, and so did the others. And then, but when they had the Constitutional Convention, slavery was not part of that our Constitution, and everybody knew this was the ticket out of slavery eventually. They needed the South to ride it up, so they just kept it a little bit neutral from that. So it's to latch onto that is a big, big mistake. Frederick Douglass said it was a big mistake. He says, don't do that. It's not a slaver document. You're going in the wrong direction. And as a PBS NewsHour essayist, I'm not sure he's alive or not, his name was Clarence Page, and he wrote an essay once and says, don't do that. The founding fathers rose to the occasion. They knew all their faults. They knew everything that was wrong with slavery and it shouldn't be, and they rose above it to write a constitution that's timeless. Just a few general principles on one page. It's not the European Union Maastricht Agreement, 254 pages, unworkable like our tax code. It's not just a few pages. So they wrote a great document, and we shouldn't be just remove the subject of slavery from that and try to get it out of the conversation even in the nation, because the longer you put it front and center, like 1619, is the longer you prolong it.
Yeah. So
someday we have to just treat all people of all ethnic backgrounds as fellow Americans. Whoopi Goldberg herself says, stop calling me an African American. I'm an American. Stop it.
Yeah. No,
I'm not alone in this, what I'm saying.
It's an important point. And for those joining us midstream here through our conversation, I'll just remind everybody that this is the new podcast series, The San Francisco Conservative, named after David Parker's latest book. And we're talking about very thought-provoking subject, that 1619 Project, which is a journalistic project by the New York Times, sort of refocusing on slavery. And I was just wondering if it sounds like, I mean, I can certainly be sympathetic to the need to redress, violations of human rights and civil rights, whether it's, 1968 or whatever the case may be. But it sounds like this is kind of a distortion of history. I mean, maybe we should really be putting this same amount of focus onto contributions that African Americans have made over the years. I have a friend, I think I've told you about him, my friend Mark Mitchell, who's also a jazz musician, and on the side, but he collected lots of African American memorabilia, and he showed me some items from Madam C.J. Walker, who had a line of Black African American women's cosmetics and hair care products and so on. I think she became a millionaire, and this was probably before African American citizens were given the right to vote in this country. So I know, David, you've talked about not letting, we're not saying, hey, I'm a victim, that's why I can't succeed. Is that really what we're talking about here?
I suppose what Blacks have to do is what every minority in this country has done when they've experienced discrimination, is they turn within to their own community. Miss Walker turned within her community. She produced a product for community, and she made money. I like to say, if you're an architect and you can't get a job in a white architecture firm, you get a job in a Black architecture firm and produce for Black clients. And if you're good, the market's going to come right to you, and it's going to jump that discrimination. The Negro Baseball League, the players were better than them than in the National League. And eventually the Dodgers says, we want the World Series. Forget this. We're going to hire those better players and bring them over. And that was the end of it. And that's how it works.
Jackie Robinson.
Yeah, Jackie Robinson. You can't keep talking about what we did or what any group did. We don't talk about what the Greeks did or what the French or the Germans did. No one's talking about that in school. So there's no reason to talk about what the Blacks did. If they did something, it should be part of the textbook. It shouldn't be neglected, but that's all. Just treat everybody equally. That's all.
Yeah. You're still very active as an entrepreneur and as a businessman there in San Francisco. And I think, I certainly am aware that San Francisco is a real melting pot, as they say. I'm not far from New York City, same sort of thing. And it's not just Black, white, but Asian, Hispanic, Italian, on and on. And right. When you're working on new projects and so on, buildings and so on, I certainly get the impression you look for the best qualified people. You're not paying attention to quotas and stuff like that. Right?
As a school teacher, even, I remember coming home and my father asked me, "Who are the kids in your class? Or what background?" And I says, "I don't even look. I see them. This is Jackie. This is Jill. I don't care who they are. I don't even see them. I should see them as human beings." in doing business in San Francisco, if you're a tenant and you want to rent an apartment, you're going to find that half the buildings are owned by Italians from way back. The other half are owned by Asians. The first thing they do when they come here, they're discriminated against. They go buy property. They start their own companies. They work within their own community. You can walk down Clement Street in Geary in San Francisco. And I asked somebody who had lived in China for a while, does China look like this? Does China looks exactly like that? So you just turn to your own community. And then after a while, the nation as a whole comes to you because if you have something to offer, the market wants it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Let me
all.
ask, I don't know if this is shifting gears dramatically or whatever, but it was not long ago, earlier this year, that the Senate confirmed the first Black female Supreme Court justice. And everyone said, certainly, I think Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey maybe said it, the most effusively. This is a historic milestone. I mean, for over 100 years, all the Supreme Court justices were white guys like you and me. Is that a milestone to be celebrated, or should we not even think about it like that?
Didn't even think about it like that. Barack Obama was president. Nobody talked about him being Black, particularly. We've had Black chief justices or justices, and we've had Blacks in all offices. Nothing has improved because Blacks have been there, and they're not worse because Blacks have been there. They're just like anybody else. If they're qualified, they get elected. The voters know that they're the best. The mayor of New York City, everybody voted for him. They knew he was the best. Even if they didn't agree with everything he believed, he was the best. They voted for him. That's all there was to it.
Do you think is it condescending to say she's a Black female?
Yeah, it's condescending. It's racism all over the place. The first thing that she said in her early interviews says, this country, America, is a beacon to the whole world for freedom and democracy. And she actually won over the whole Senate, but they were voting on partisan lines, even though I don't think anybody really cared or was against her, even though a vote might have looked like they were divided, but nobody really was.
Yeah, yeah.
She was fine. She was a public defender as a younger person. When you're younger, everybody's a public defender when you're younger. When you're older, you become Apollo and you're less Dionysus. That's what happens. You just grow up. Yeah. She grew up a little bit.
So, and of course, I'm thinking back, I think when I was working for CBS News Sunday morning, we did a story when Clarence Thomas was nominated, and now he's quite appreciated by conservatives and Republicans. And so it's not a, people don't fit into neat little pigeonholes,
No, I can say something controversial here. The left was so against him, not because he was Black, because they would have wanted a Black, but because he was so conservative. And they said, we have to defeat this person. So they got Anita Hill and the NAACP and Planned Parenthood, everybody just got her to get up there and testify. And a lot of people said that Anita Hill lied. So this, I believe you, Anita, is countered by, no, we don't believe you, Anita. And there's been some books on that she lied. Yeah. To get that man out of office. Don't let him be that. So I'm a conservative. My classical conservatism says that's really wrong.
So do you think maybe it's time to call an end to the 1619 project, or it's focused in the wrong direction, or what would you say?
You're focusing on a secondary issue. And if Blacks did all kinds of things in American history, that should be part of the textbook, and that's all. As did the Greeks and did French and Germans and everybody, and Asians, everybody else has done something, and that should be in the textbooks, but not primary focus. It's primary focus is safeguarding American democracy from progressivism.
Excellent. Well, I promised our viewers, our listeners, we'd be having thought-provoking subjects, and this is certainly one of those. So we look forward to comments from those of you, what your perspective is on this, and we'll build them into our show and respond. But this has certainly given me something new to think about. So thank you, David. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Pleasure.
And don't forget, I'll tell our listeners and viewers, don't forget to pick up copies of David's books, Income and Wealth, and the newest one, A San Francisco Conservative. You can do that by visiting davidparkeressays.com or by going right to Amazon. So thanks.
Great.